October 20th, the study session, which of course tonight will be about the budget. And before we start the meeting, we do have a little portion of time for citizens' right to speak on items that are in the agenda, which of course tonight is the budget. So do we have some citizens here that wish to speak? Yes. We're going to race for the microphone. Okay.
I didn't see it. I didn't see one over there.
No, I didn't see one. I don't think there's one.
Please go ahead.
Okay. My name is Christine Disney. Do you need my address? Okay. I'm here to encourage the City Council to go forth with the 38th corridor implementation. I know that there are two major 5-year goals that really, if this is put forward, would address that, which would be creating an economically viable commercial area and a more attractive Wheat Ridge. I was on a bus tour yesterday, Discover Wheat Ridge, and I was very proud of what I saw. There's a lot of great strides that the city has made since I've lived here for 20 years. There's a lot going on. But the one thing that I noticed as the bus was going down 38th Avenue was that it really could use a lot of sprucing up. There's been a lot of businesses that have invested money into their storefronts, but I think the time has come for Wheat Ridge to move forward and make that our core area for improvement, excitement, and a lot of new businesses. I know that a lot of people think that the world will come to an end. I've never seen so much opposition for something, or for something that I can't understand what the opposition is for. The metrics show that the travel time hasn't slowed down. Emergency response times haven't been impeded. People are driving the speed limit rather than speeding through there. The volume of traffic really hasn't changed that much. And sales tax revenues are up, which would address the fact that it's becoming more economically viable. In fact, I think there was probably a lot of opposition from people when they were told that the earth really was round instead of flat, and we know how that turned out. So I'd like to encourage the council to see that the corridor plan is implemented, because I think it's something that will definitely benefit the city of Wheat Ridge.
Thank you. Do we have someone else? Gina?
Hi there, Gina Hallisey I'm here with the Zope Circus and the festival, and I'll make it super brief because you guys have heard me a million times. But I wanted to make sure everyone received the video that we sent via email last week. Did everybody get that? Awesome. I hope you had a chance to look at it. Turned out really great. Congratulations to all of you for a great 45th year with the festival. I had some computer issues, or you would have had this last week. So I just wanted to officially come here, give you a final report. I don't know if I made enough copies. I made 10 copies, but we can pass them around and everyone will have a report on the circus. The good news is I forgot to add in the rec center ticket sales, so the actual was $64,560 in revenue. So the net, the expenses were $98,775.95, and the net was $34,215.95. That was the loss. So it was $2,400 difference from last year, but a little better than I had thought, just because we hadn't done all the accounting. So I'll leave this with Janelle to go out to everyone. And then someone had asked me for a festival budget, so I brought that as well. And so this is the final for the festival, and it has the actuals for 2013, and then it also has the actuals for 2014. 2013, we just had like lump sums, but you can see that they, more than doubled their budget this year and did very well. The net was, it was a $100,000 event, just like the circus, and the net was minus $11,765.54, but considering we were able to wrangle some sponsorship that wasn't paid from 2013, we actually were up by 734. So the festival did really well, and congratulations to the committee and the board for doing a great job. And I want to give you a final report in a media book. This has everything in it, including a check, 2 checks, equaling $59,000 in revenue, and a copy of the video. So everything, all the marketing and everything is in here for the city record. So I just want to give that to you guys. Who gets the checks? Heather.
Oh, darn.
Hello, Adam Wiley with the Active Transportation Advisory Team. First of all, very grateful for everything the city and staff have done to promote active transportation in the last year. And as we move into 2015, obviously looking forward to a lot more good things. So we're excited about and appreciative of a little bit of money for our group, as well as the draft amount of $100,000 to continue active transportation efforts next year, and we do encourage you and hope that that funding will remain. I think it's important. It shows a lot of commitment. It shows commitment to the community as well as the strategic goals. A good example, again, Pier Street. The council showed the willingness to do it right, and I think that's paid off. I think it's getting a lot of community support and showing a lot of community support as well. What the Active Transportation Advisory Team would like to focus on mainly infrastructure-wise next year would probably be the Wheat Ridge, the connection on 35th Avenue with the City of Denver, connected with them today, and that project is underway to, not underway, but is in the planning stages to convert 35th on the Denver side into a bicycle boulevard. There's a whole document on their site about what that means, and Rachel at the city, and they have a newer guy named Dan at the city who's responsible for their bike planning, and I are communicating about what that's going to look like, and we're going to try to make sure we get it consistency and make it a pretty cool connection. Another part of that we see coming up is ADA compliance and a plan that goes along with that, and that includes a sidewalk inventory, and obviously for active transportation, effective and useful sidewalks and safe sidewalks in those priority routes for transit and transportation are key, and of course we'd like to support that as well. And just to be clear, that doesn't mean sidewalks everywhere. And then and again, some work on the bike ped master plan would be great to see that updated with the connections that are already in place, as well as improvements that have already been made. So again, I want to thank you and encourage continued support of active transportation. Thanks.
We have another speaker?
Good evening. I just want to ditto everything Adam just said. I'm Rachel Hulteen with the Active Transportation Advisory Team. And when one of our council partners allowed us to take a look at what the city's doing, proposing for 2015, it was just really wonderful to see the priorities that the city's making around investing in vibrant neighborhoods, and that is playing out in healthy, connected neighborhoods. And excuse me, I raced over here from swim team and I had to drive, unfortunately. And in looking at the budget, it was really clear in the priorities that were set forth by so many departments that investing in Wheat Ridge and trying to move Wheat Ridge forward as a community as a whole was evident throughout, not just in the allocation of funding for bike and pedestrian infrastructure, ADA improvements, trying to go for a bike-friendly city. So we really, I want to, first of all, just stand up here to celebrate and just thank the city for seeing through those visions and including that when they are trying to look at how to fund different projects and priorities. I know that revenue in the city is not falling out of the cracks and the seams. So I appreciate that you're making that priority, and we hope that you're able to see through that in 2015. Given that the upcoming election has a couple of ballot initiatives that would impact that, I'm very hopeful, as are a lot of us, that 2A passes so that the city can have the funds it needs to get caught up on infrastructure and drainage, and then hopefully they can continue allocating funds towards active transportation. And seeing that 38th Avenue is an important part of the city's plan across agencies, we really are looking forward to seeing that mandate moving forward and getting it implemented and funded. So thank you for your leadership.
Any more speakers? I don't think so. I think we can move on.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, we're here tonight to present you the 2015 proposed budget. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our executive management team and all of our budget department contacts who worked on the budget this year. I think we're all pulled in many directions this year, Council and staff, and including myself. So I specifically want to thank Nate and Heather for pulling the budget together this year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the presentation tonight because I don't know what's in it. Just joking. But Heather, but seriously, Heather and Nate really stepped up this year to make sure that we got this out to you. So I just want to mention this photo too that's up on the screen and on your handout. I love this photo. This is from our recent groundbreaking of the Sprouts development in Wheat Ridge, and I think this just kind of goes to show you what I think the exciting things that are coming to our community, and because of what this council and previous councils and staff have done to get us to this point, and we're hoping to continue building on that and seeing even greater things. So it's always nice to remind us of why we're doing all this. The City Council has established a vision for the community for the out year of 2025. This is what we would hope our city to continue looking like and improving on. Wheat Ridge is a beautiful city and a community for families. Wheat Ridge has great neighborhoods, vibrant commercial centers, and multimodal transportation, and is committed to environmental stewardship. Wheat Ridge residents enjoy an active, healthy lifestyle and hometown feeling and pride. Wheat Ridge, a great place to live. Isn't that nice? Yeah, brings a tear. The mayor's crying over here. And then we have some 5-year goals that council has established, and we continue looking at these on an annual basis to make sure that these are still relevant, and I think these are very relevant in today's Wheat Ridge. Those 4 goals for a 5-year period are economically viable commercial areas, financially sound city providing exceptional service, choice of desirable neighborhoods, and more attractive Wheat Ridge. And the city staff takes the vision and the goals into consideration when they are creating their budget. And so hopefully we can demonstrate that the 2015 proposed budget will help us meet that vision and goals. Just some quick short-term budget items. The 2015 general fund budget, on an annual basis, we do get more requests than we can fund. In the general fund alone, there were at least close to $600,000 worth of items that I took out of the budget. I felt we could wait on. So keep that in mind when we go through the budget, that there are certain things that we weren't able to budget for. And also to preface this presentation, the budget was proposed and developed based on our current revenue sources, so it does not take into account a potential sales tax increase, so keep that in mind. We do have some items that, if it does pass, we would like to bring back to City Council at a later date and really have several discussions and detailed discussions to prioritize how we'll spend that additional revenue if we are so lucky for that to pass. The budget, this is our 4th year of using priority-based budgeting, and that's a process that staff uses to really prioritize programs and services that are meeting the City Council's desired outcomes and the community's desired outcomes. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more. We were able to transfer about $1.4 million, or exactly $1.4 million, from the general fund into the CIP, the capital budget for next year. And that is not enough to take care of our capital needs, but we'll speak to that in a little more detail later also. We're also transferring $125,000 to our capital equipment replacement fund. This is to build up funds to help us with replacement of major capital equipment expenditures, and some examples we've used this for in the past were police department radio system. We have some money budgeted in next year's budget for the conversion to a regionalized records management system. And some other items that we're looking at in the future are a new financial software program, and the regional dispatch system also will need some funds potentially to get us off and going on that project. So in the end, we are presenting a budget that does take our general fund reserves down to 17%, which is City Council's policy for a minimum of 17%. Some long-term fiscal challenges that we're still seeing is this perpetual systemic funding gap that we see in providing for capital needs. If you looked at your budget book, you see the CIP budget for the out years of 2016 to 2023 has basically no revenues associated with it for capital projects. We were able to budget some for 2015. As I mentioned, we were able to transfer 1.4, and there also is some grant funding for 2015. But as I mentioned, beyond 2015, we have no funding, at least projected based on today's revenue and expenditure trends. However, as you know, we're looking at a 1% sales tax increase on this year's ballot. So if that is approved by our voters, that would generate about $6.4 million, which we've dedicated to public works, parks and recreation, critical capital infrastructure projects. So if that does pass again, as I mentioned, I recommend that we come back to you after the first of the year or after the election and start having some discussions about how that funding would be spent, and we take our time and then amend the budget as needed at the end of the year or at the beginning of next year. And then we still need to continue our focus on economic development. So you will see significant amount of money in the budget for economic development activities, which I think have been paying off, and I think we need to continue that so that we can continue diversifying our tax base. So getting into the numbers, we're looking at our total budget. This includes all funds, our general fund, capital budgets, recreation center fund, and all of our special revenue funds. We're projecting revenues at about $36 million. We have about $13 million on hand now, so we'll have total available funds of just under $50 million in all of our budgets. This revenue projection is about a 7% decrease compared to what we're estimating for 2004. A good chunk of that decrease is because of a large sales tax audit that we received this year, about $1.7 million, which is a one-time thing, and so that really bumped up our revenues this year. So we're not projecting to see any large ones like that next year. Hope maybe we will, but if we do, that's cherry on top of the pie, I guess, or ice cream. And then, so our ending fund balance of all funds at the end of next year, we're projecting to be just over $8 million, and this is about a 15% decrease compared to this year's budget. The large decrease in our fund balance is primarily this year. We did spend quite a bit of our fund balance. A couple examples were the $1 million economic development incentive we gave to the Kipling Ridge project, and also we paid down a portion of the loan for the 44th and Watts project, which was about $1.4 million. So we did utilize some of our revenue or fund balance this year for some economic development projects. So total proposed expenditures, again for all funds, is about $40 million, and this is a decrease of about 19% compared to this year's budget. And again, that was primarily large decrease because of those large expenditures we made this year for the Sprouts project and the pay down of the loan. The general fund purchased or gave some money to Urban Renewal Authority to purchase property at 38th and Watts. So those expenditures all came out of this budget, and we don't anticipate those expenditures next year, so you are seeing a significant decrease in the overall budget. But as you can see, the general fund is the largest portion of those funds, 72%. The CIP budget, 16%. The Recreation Center Fund, 6%. And then we have some smaller budgets. So now we speak specifically about the general fund, the 72% of that total budget. The general fund proposed budget or projected revenues for next year, we're projecting at about $28 million. And we'll have about just over $8 million cash on hand in the general fund. So that gives us about $37 million to work with. This is about a 5%, the revenues are about a 5% decrease compared to what we're estimating this year. And again, that was because of that one large time sales tax audit this year, primarily. Revenues broken down by type. As you all know, we've pounded this into you, I think. Sales tax and use tax are the two largest, together are the two largest sources. About 70% of our revenues come from our sales and use tax. So it's a very important revenue source for the city. And I always like to point out property tax is kind of the salmon color piece of the pie there is only about 2.6%. So property tax is a very small portion of our total general fund revenues. General fund expenditures, we're proposing just under 30 million. And that's against revenues of just under 29 million. So we are proposing to use just under 800,000 of our general fund reserves to balance the general fund budget this year. Expenditures are about a 4% decrease compared to this year's adjusted budget. And again, it was because of those things I mentioned earlier, the Sprouts project, the pay down of the loan, purchase of the property at 38th and Wads. So we're projecting an ending fund balance of just over $6 million at the end of next year. Of that, the unrestricted fund balance is just over $5 million, or 17%. The difference between those two are part of that $6.1 million. We have restricted funds for the Tabor emergency reserves, which is about $900,000, 3% of our budget, and then we also have Channel 8 funds in there that are restricted for Channel 8 programming only. So that makes up that difference of those two numbers. Now you break down expenditures by function and service and programming. Police department is our largest. This stays pretty static every year. Percentages are pretty right on actually every year. 32% police department, and then your Parks and Rec and Public Works are usually tied at 15% for the second largest expenditures. Administrative services, all of our internal functions in the city is 11%. General government and central charges are at 10%, and then community development 4%, and municipal court 3%. So I mentioned the City Council's 5-year goals earlier, and we've kind of broken out some items in the proposed budget that apply to each of these goals. Some of them kind of cross over, so you may ask, well, why is it under that goal? It could go under a different goal. It probably could, but we stuck them under the goal that we thought closely matched as closely as possible. So our first goal of economically viable commercial areas. We're continuing funding to Renewal Wheat Ridge, which they've been using for renewal Wheat Ridge projects, urban renewal projects. We're estimating that at about $450,000. And again, that comes from the sales tax increment that comes off the town center project, the Safeway project. That agreement with Renewal Wheat Ridge actually ends at the end of this year, so we have it scheduled in a few weeks to discuss that with City Council to look at extending that agreement. We have several outstanding STEP, enhanced sales tax incentive programs, and some TIF, tax increment financing obligations. We're estimating those are going to be at about $400,000 for 2015 payments. Ridge at 38 public events, just over 98,000. These are for the several events that are held throughout the year on 38th Avenue. Citywide public relations and marketing efforts, 80,000. 60,000 of this is our contract with our PR firm to help us with the marketing efforts we've been working on. And the additional 20,000 is for more general economic development related advertising and marketing efforts that Steve works on specifically. Community engagement and communications. This is a request from Wheatridge 2020 of $50,000. This would help them, I think, with staffing to look at some more communication efforts and a lot of the community engagement that they continue to do on an annual basis of getting out in the community and web page and stuff like that. Yes. The Wheatridge Business District loan program, $45,000, and I think this was the request from the district. I think what they actually asked for. And this is the annual program where they provide the business loans. Live still under the same goal of economically viable commercial areas. Our Live Local events. This is a little bit of an increase. I believe 2020 is asking for this $40,000. This is for the fairly successful program actually on this Live Local. They have different events throughout the year. They're building up business loan program, which they call Bubble. This is a decrease, I believe, from same as last year. I think it's a decrease from the previous years. This is a request by 2020 for $25,000. Citywide marketing and positioning tours, $15,000. This is a Wheatridge 2020 request. And example of this, I think Ms. Disney mentioned she was on a tour this weekend. They give many tours. This last one, what was the last tour? This last weekend's tour? Yesterday. New resident tour. They give tours for realtors, developers. I think they had 40 people on this last bus tour to show off the city to different folks. 44th Avenue corridor marketing efforts. This is to kind of help start shifting some of our efforts to 44th Avenue to help them market as a business corridor. And then also a smaller corridor, the 29th Avenue Marketplace. We have $5,000 budgeted for some efforts along there. Kipling corridor planning efforts. We put this in there and kind of had a change of thought kind of here in the last few days, but the Kipling corridor is kind of a ever-evolving, changing corridor, and we haven't had a sub-area plan done on that corridor, but as you all know, things are changing and kind of changing rapidly as we speak. So you know, CDOT completed a Pell at the interchange there. Of course, Sprouts is going at 38th and Kipling. The Gold's Market has moved. We have interest in the 44th and Kipling corner also, and so we believe we need to. I don't know if it'll be the same amount, but I think I would propose we still leave some money in the budget to do some marketing, planning efforts to determine what that corridor should look like, so that we're not responding to development requests kind of willy-nilly, and we want to make sure we have a plan in place so that it develops in the best way possible for our community. And you know, that corridor is obviously it's been a difficult corridor with some of the issues we've been having with our hotels and multifamily up there. So I think there needs to be some efforts to look at what we can do to improve that corridor. 2020 has a $15,000 request for Ridge at 38, their banners and the lights that they do throughout the year. So those, those are some of the items under economically viable commercial areas. Moving on to our second goal, a financially sound city providing exceptional service. We are able to get to squeeze in about $1.6 million in the CIP budget for next year for preventative street maintenance, and Scott and his team put together a pretty detailed analysis of our road conditions, and there's an index that measures road conditions, and you typically want to keep them at good or better. If they start getting below that index, the more money you're going to have to put into the road to potentially maybe redo it from scratch. So we try to keep them at a certain level that they're going to last a lot longer. And we've identified that this number should be closer to $4 million to keep all of our streets at that good or above levels. So obviously an issue, but at least we were able to get some in there, and they've identified the priority projects that if this budget passes, that these funds will go for. And again, I mentioned the transfer to the equipment replacement fund, $125,000 for those large equipment replacements. Fleet acquisition and replacement, we have a long list of fleet replacement obligations. We kept it fairly minimal, down to just over $500,000. I think the largest expense in here is for a front loader for the Public Works Department, but most of the other vehicles are in the public safety arena. Employee compensation, Heather will talk about that a little bit later. We have about $450,000 in there for pay performance increases for those employees who meet our required obligations. It's about a 3% overall increase. Same goal, second page. Again, these are some items that are helping us save the city money in the long run. We've been talking about these for the last few years, but the regionalization of the police department's RMS, records management system, we're projecting that's going to cost the city about $235,000 this next year, but that's going to save the city potentially millions in software upgrades and program upgrades, equipment upgrades that we're not going to have to purchase because we're regionalizing it with the metro area. Same with the Lakewood Crime Lab services. We've had this for a couple years. We've outsourced this to Lakewood. This has saved the city a substantial amount of money. We're looking at retrofitting some of the city's lighting at City Hall, specifically here, to LED lighting, which there's an initial upfront cost, but that's going to save the money, or the city, some money in the future. Regional Crime Lab is similar to the Lakewood Crime Lab services, $31,000. This is a way for us to save money, outsource that program. Our employee safety and wellness program, it's been very successful and continuing to see some benefits to the city in our health insurance renewal rates. We're spending a very minimal amount of money, about just over $30,000, to encourage employees to continue to live a safe and well life, to keep them healthy and keep our insurance rates down. And then our priority-based budgeting, we have some continued funding in there to continue this process. It really gives us, again, a new lens to look at our budgeting process to make sure that we are doing things as efficiently as possible to save money. Our third goal, choice of desirable neighborhoods. We have several items in here I would like to highlight. Prospect Park improvements. Joyce has some money in her open space fund for that, $300,000. Outdoor pool maintenance of $180,000. That's out of the open space fund again. As some of our speakers mentioned earlier, we are proposing $100,000 in our CIP budget for some pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Nothing, I don't think, specific project identified, but just some money in there which we can identify a project later. Recreation center maintenance. That's out of the Conservation Trust Fund, $100,000. New park playground at Hank Stites Park. That's out of the Conservation Trust Fund. New parking lot at Active Adult Center. Again, the Conservation Trust Fund. The Kipling Pedestrian Trail Improvement Grant Match. The Open Space Fund is helping with that project. And expansion of this is what we currently call the East Wheat Ridge Block Improvement Program. We're proposing to expand this. This was requested. A few council members, I know Mr. DiTullio and others, have asked if we could look at expanding this to other parts of the city. So this is an increase from $15,000 to $35,000 in 2020 would manage those funds. Some traffic signal upgrades throughout the city, $28,000. The Home Investment Loan Program, $25,000. Again, that's a 2020 program. Hayward Park outdoor fitness equipment just outside of City Hall here. It's kind of a new trend where there's outdoor fitness equipment trying to meet demands of our citizens. Police Department community-oriented neighborhood programming, $17,000. Police Department some green belt patrol, $17,000. Aging needs plan implementation, $13,000, and some special events over time in our police department. A lot of this is for some neighborhood events that our neighborhoods are starting to be more and more active and requesting some police presence at their activities. On to our last goal, more attractive Wheat Ridge. The Kipling Street multi-use path and lighting project will continue into next year. That was a partially grant-funded project. About 2.8 million of it will be expended next year. Just some miscellaneous parks and trails maintenance projects out of the Conservation Trust Fund budget of 230,000 and open space funds budget. General open space improvements, 90,000. Our citywide right-of-way maintenance program. We've talked about this numerous times. This is outsourced program that we have to maintain some of those right-of-ways throughout the city that are very visible, that aren't getting done, that we're responsible for as a city, or just aren't getting done by some other agency. That contract's about 55,000. Bus shelter and bench maintenance and cleaning, 36,000. Our public art acquisition funds, we're starting to get a balance in that budget now, and we have 20,000 budgeted for public art. And I believe this, Joyce, is this for the commuter rail station? Possibly. So it's doesn't have a specific funding use at this point, but we have some money in there in case we need it for the commuter rail station. RTD may cover the full amount of that expense. Our annual plantings along 38th Avenue is 5,000. Large item pickup program we do annually, 5,000. So those are some items that kind of meet the goals in a more specific manner, but we also have some other notable budget items. Just want to make sure that council's aware of. We did put the request in the budget for 80,000 for the Carnation Festival / Zopi Family Circus. This is a new request, or same program, but a different. It's funded differently, or it's just a new budget request from the Carnation Festival. They would like to combine the two items, the Carnation Festival and Zopi Family Circus, and ask for a $80,000 contribution from the city. And then on top of that, continue our in-kind assistance. And that in-kind assistance, 25,000 of that roughly is for overtime for our different departments, police department, public works, parks department, for that event. And then also, I think there's some barricades in there that the city purchases for the what do you call it? Parade. So this is a new way of doing this, and I believe Gina did and Joey handed out that information to City Council. It was passed around tonight also, which shows the new proposal for how they would like to manage that program. We can talk about that in more detail. Seniors Resource Center, the circulator bus. This is the full amount that they've requested for the last couple of years. We typically given about 30,000, but we've put in the 42 that they've asked for. Jeffco Public Schools Outdoor Lab Program, just over 16,000. Arvada Food Bank, 15,000 now that they are servicing the whole city. Feed the Future Backpack Program is 10,000. Action Center Capital Campaign is 10,000. We gave them. They asked for 30,000 last year. We gave them 10. Or this in 2014, we gave them 10. And I think at that point, City Council said we would consider giving them 10 for 3 years in a row. Our outside agency request to the nonprofits that serve Wheat Ridge, 10,000. Regional Air Quality Council RAC, 4,000. The Kite Festival, 3,000. Example Lutheran Leaves of Hope event, 2,500. Jefferson Center for Mental Health, 2,500. Wheat Ridge Farmers, 5,000, 2,500. And speaker mentioned this evening the Wheat Ridge Active Transportation Advisory Committee. They've asked for 1,000 next year to help them with some of their programming. And just a couple final items. We did this last year. This is part of our priority-based budgeting process. We identified contingency funds across the city's budget that may or may not get used on an annual basis, and we were able to combine those into one line item of $100,000, and it saves the city about $75,000 a year. And this is just a citywide fund. It's typically for if there's a need that comes up in a department to do a quick study, a planning process study, recruitment for our sergeants, police department sergeant process, any type of professional services that may come up based on council's needs throughout the year that we didn't budget can come out of that fund. And then we rebudgeted the biennial citizen survey, as you know, that last year or this year we were supposed to do it, we decided to put that off just because of all the other projects going on. And so we were able to work with the National Research Center, and they held our cost and actually are not gonna, they're gonna reuse a lot of the work they already put into it for this year. So it's saving us some money. Okay, now on to the capital investment program budget. Total available funds available in 2015, we're proposing at just over, or $6.5 million, and a good chunk of that's from grant funding. But after all of our expenditures, proposed expenditures for next year, we're going to have about $189,000 left in our fund balance. As you can see, the revenues of 4.7, 53% of that's coming from grants, 41% is from the general fund transfer of 1.4 million. They also get a little bit of lodger's tax. The expenditures are broken down as such, and I'll let Scott talk about them specifically, but the largest expenditure category for next year are street improvement projects. And Scott, if you want to talk about some of the proposed projects.
Sure. Walk us through some of the proposed capital projects, capital improvement projects in the budget in the CIP. First off, the Kipling Street pedestrian improvements, the 2.8 million approximately. That's funded 80% from the federal grant, 20% from the city's share roughly. This is the Kipling multi-use path between 32nd Avenue and 44th Avenue. Next up there you see are the preventive street maintenance projects, 1.6 million. This is a slight bump up from the 1.3 million we had budgeted this past year. This amount of money goes into, the bulk of that is our asphalt overlay project. Also includes patching, crack sealing, miscellaneous striping, and then we've also been picking up some miscellaneous curb work, pedestrian ramps, and so forth with that. The Gold Line Station Street project, that's essentially Tabor Street from the I-70 North Frontage Road up to the Gold Line Station, which we have under design right now. Again, that's a grant received from RTD to fund the project, and we expect construction to start in time for the opening of the station, or to have construction completed in time for the station opening in 2016. The Wadsworth Planning and Environmental Linkage Study is ongoing right now. We intend to have that finished up this spring. That is looking at a planning study for Wadsworth from 35th Avenue up to 46th Avenue. Federal grants covering approximately 53% of the cost for that. Going to the next slide here. Clear Creek storm sewer outfall replacements. We do have a couple of major storm lines that outlet into Clear Creek at a couple locations, one near Balsam Street, another one further east near the ball fields, Manwaring Park, down there near Marshall Street, where we have some major outfalls that need some attention, where they're coming apart and they need to be reconstructed to prevent erosion and other damages. So we have some money budgeted for that. The 29th and Fenton intersection improvements, that's from a IGA agreement we have with Denver Water upon completion of the Ashland Reservoir project to do some work at the 29th and Fenton intersection. That'll include some realigning of the road and adjustment of the traffic signals. Bike ped improvements, $100,000. This is to continue with the momentum we built up this past year with the Pierce Street improvements, and sitting down with the master ped bike improvement plan and identifying priorities. And we don't, as Patrick mentioned, we don't have specific project identified or earmarked yet, but the needs are there in the plan, and we hope to continue with another major improvement or two in this coming year. The Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, $100,000. That's a program that we just got going again this past year, that the council resurrected, a program that was cut by the city several years ago for neighborhood traffic calming requests. That may be speed humps, chokers, curb curb bump outs, increased traffic enforcement, other measures. So we've started that program this year. We've already had several neighborhood meetings from request petitions we've received, and this is an amount to keep that program going. The Sidewalk ADA Transition Plan, $50,000. This is a program where we really want to get more aggressive with identifying where our needs are with our ped ramps. This also rolls into increased mobility, becoming more ADA compliant, but also increasing walkability, transit access, and so forth. So what this program would allow us to do is to do a more aggressive inventory and planning of what we have out there in the city, rather than just picking up some of these things as we go through in our maintenance program and our overlay program. And the neighborhood street light installation program, $15,000. This is, again, to similarly to the neighborhood traffic program, to resurrect a program that was cut from council several years ago due to budget reasons. This is for neighborhood requests for street lights. Currently, we have no funding available. If residents call in and they feel they need an extra light on their street, we simply don't have the money to put that in. So this is a small amount that at least helps us get that program going again.
Great, thanks, Scott. And then, as I mentioned before, if you look out 2016 and beyond for the CIP for capital projects, very limited to really nothing. No funds available for CIP funding in the future years. And again, that's based on current projections of revenues and expenditures. And we typically spend less every year than we budget. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of money, but again, not enough to deal with all the needs that we have on an out-year basis. We just need to continue to research and apply for grant funding. I think we've been very successful over the last several years of getting some grants. We'll continue working on that to see if we can supplement general fund funding for CIP projects. As I mentioned before, we have a sales tax referendum currently on the ballot, and partially dedicated to public works and parks and rec capital projects. So if that comes through, we'll have to evaluate that to see, prioritize our most critical needs and to get caught up on some areas. If it doesn't pass, we're going to have to look at some budget cuts, I believe, or newer increased fees and charges for services. Not sure if we can increase fees or have new charges for services. That would be enough to catch up with all our capital needs, but I think it's something we need to look at. An example is a stormwater fee that doesn't require a vote of the people. So moving on, so that's the capital budget. We're going to move on to the Recreation Center Fund. We are looking at projected revenues of just over $2 million next year and expenditures of just over 2.3. So this is having a negative impact on our fund balance, unfortunately. The fund balance in the Recreation Center was established when the Recreation Center was built to help supplement and fund maintenance and replacement of equipment in the Recreation Center funds, and the interest that was coming off that reserve fund was fairly substantial in the good old days when interest was good. But interest is so low right now. We're seeing very little interest revenues off of the fund balance. So we're eating into that fund balance on an annual basis. So this is going to, again, if the sales tax increase doesn't pass, this is going to be a discussion that we're going to have with council to talk about the long-term sustainability and funding of Recreation Center operations, because the current fee structure, which is very competitive, is not keeping up with the expenditures to maintain that recreation center, which is typical in most municipalities. The recreation center they're not self-sustainable. The general fund usually covers most cities a fairly large portion of it, and we've been lucky that we've had this large fund balance from the beginning. That's enabled us to continue operating the rec center without using general fund dollars. Open space budget is next. We're projecting revenues of just under $1 million and expenditures of 1.3 million. And I will let Joyce Manwaring talk specifically about those projects in the open space fund.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. I do want to just back up for a minute and let you know that the proposed fee schedule includes a $25 per year annual increase for pass holders at the Recreation Center. That equals about $100,000 in revenue and is based on market. So that is the only fee recommendation that we're changing, but we feel that that's competitive with the other rec centers in the area after doing a market analysis. So our open space, major projects in open space for 2015 always include about 5 to 6 of our park maintenance employees. Their salaries and benefits is charged to the open space fund. Prospect Park improvements, we have $300,000 set aside to possibly phase improvements in that park. What those will be dependent on the outcome of our master plan recommendations that'll be adopted next year in the spring. Outdoor pool maintenance, it's time to refinish the leisure pool as well as fix some of the toys that are in there. It's been, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, maybe 10. I lose track of time since we have redid the outdoor pool. And it also includes some additional shade there. Park maintenance improvement projects for $100,000 is replacement of the Panorama Park irrigation system. It's old and its coverage is inadequate, which makes it difficult to maintain, and we use more water than we need to be using. Open space improvements at $90,000 include 10 shelters and additional kiosks along the trail to make those ADA accessible, as well as to offer seating for folks that need it as they walk the trail. And then Patrick mentioned out of open space, we have a grant match for the Kipling trail pedestrian improvements that is in the CIP budget. And then trail replacement and repair, starting at Johnson's Park, traveling east. We have a few areas that have drainage problems, as well as what we call the hoop-de-doos that go like this over the storm drains that are really not appropriate for trail. So we'll be trying to take a look at getting those flattened out. And then several years, I guess 2 years ago now, Jeffco Open Space asked us to match their river corridor grant with GOCO in the Clear Creek County up at the west end, because it is part of the Clear Creek Trail. Council agreed to do that at that time. They haven't requested that match yet, but that's what the $25,000 is for.
Thank you, Joyce. On the Conservation Trust funds, we're projecting about $300,000 in revenue and expenditures at just $365,000. And again, Joyce will talk about the project specifically.
So the Conservation Trust Fund is the lottery dollars. I didn't mention before, just to remind you, the Open Space Fund is the half-cent sales tax collected and distributed to us based on our population. So what we've been doing over the last several years is allotting a certain amount of money for recreation center maintenance for the capital improvement projects that need to occur there. And that usually includes HVAC replacement. It will actually be 15 years in February since the recreation center opened. We have done many things, but other things are really starting to need to be replaced. So that's the $100,000. It also includes carpet replacement. This year we bought some fitness equipment, updated that, looking at new community room chairs, that type of thing. Stites Park playground replacement is at the end of its lifespan, so we're ready to go with that park. Active Adult Center parking lot replacement, we've been piecemealing and patching that concrete parking lot for quite a few years now, so this is a complete replacement. And then park maintenance projects at $50,000 is to put a dent into the ADA requirements and accessibility requirements in our parks and playgrounds. Resurfacing of tennis basketball courts is an annual expenditure at $30,000 for all of our outdoor courts. And then we are proposing outdoor fitness equipment, which is a new trend, ellipticals in the parks where people come stay outside and exercise, and other types of equipment at $25,000. We're proposing putting that in Hayward Park around the trail here.
Thanks, Joyce. And then we won't talk specifically about the rest of the special revenue funds, but if you do have any questions about those, and they are on pages 176 to 188 of your proposed book, budget book, those include public art, police investigation fund, the municipal court, capital equipment replacement, and the crime prevention code enforcement funds. They are significantly smaller than the rest of the budgets, but if you have specific questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions on that. Moving on to staffing, we have some cleanup a little bit to do with our some of our positions and some positions that are proposed for elimination, and then also some positions that we're asking for new positions. We've had a .875 FTE deputy court clerk, actually this is just a court clerk, I think, right, on the books for several years that the court has not filled, and they're proposing to actually eliminate that position right now, but they are asking for a new position, which we'll get to. And then the court marshal position was actually just a clerical error. It was showing on our books as a .010 more in FTEs, so we cleaned that up. And same thing with this recreation coordinator in parks. It was showing, it was basically rounding errors. It was showing as a .005 higher than it really is. So we're just cleaning the budget up with those two items, and the first one is an elimination. Then we have two grant-funded positions in the police department right now. One is an SRO, and one is a vice officer. And those were funded with the COPS grant, federal COPS grant. And the obligation to the city is that the city maintains those positions for 1 year after the grant has expired, after a 3-year grant. So 2015 will be that year that we're obligated to hold on to those two officers. So so those would be two positions that we're not going to receive grant funding for in 2015, but we required to fund those. New positions. We did have more requests, and some of the requests I think were more tied to maybe the sales tax, potential sales tax increase that we'll discuss later. But we tried to limit the new position requests to those positions that we thought were more needed at this time. First one is a permit technician. We currently have one permit technician in our community development building department that deals with all of our permits on a daily basis. And with the growth in development in the city and the expected continued growth, for customer services reasons, we would like to increase this to 2 positions, so an increase of 1, which would really help out with customer service. It would expand hours, coverage for when employees are on break or lunch or on vacation or sick. So that is, I think, probably a priority position that is very critical. And Ken, did you have anything to add to that?
Just to throw some brief numbers to it, I guess. We'll do a record number of permits this year, excepting for what we did in those storm years where we had all the roof permits. So our kind of running average over the last 5 years has been about 1,580 permits, and we'll do between 1,800 and 2,000. So part of it's just a pure volume, but we've been asking a lot from the existing position as it is. In our survey work of other Front Range communities, what we determined was that an average number of permits processed by a permit technician is about 800 to 900, and with one permit tech, just kind of those pure numbers make sense in terms of if we have 2 people in the position. In addition to the customer service enhancements that Patrick mentioned, it's a much more appropriate amount of work to ask for the position.
And just to add to that too, and this year we changed our hours of our permit division to 7 to 4, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Correct? If this position is approved, we can extend those hours from 7 back to 5. That gives us a little bit more time. I think it's been favored by the building community that they like the early morning hours, but there's still a few that I think would appreciate the little bit later afternoon hours too. So this is really going to help with customer service. The next priority is 2 emergency services specialist positions in the police department. These, you can call them dispatchers, call takers in our E911 center. And this is something the chief and I have been losing sleep over for many years. We have some critical needs in our communication center with coverage during certain times of the night. If we had significant incident in the city, at some points during the evening, we have 1 person in there in the dispatch center, which would not be able to cover a major incident. So this has been recommended by several studies that we have done, have had done for the city over the last several years. And I think it's something that we need to move forward with, and I'll let the chief respond to provide any more information he'd like.
Thanks, Patrick. We've had 2 studies that have been done by communication associations, and they've recommended, that we, given our call for service load and our current staffing, that we should have an additional 5 positions in the communications center. We've brought that to councils in the past, but with the economic downturn, it wasn't feasible. From about 1 o'clock in the morning till about 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning, we have 1 call taker dispatcher on duty, and we've had a number of incidents that have happened where we just have 1 dispatcher on and 1 to 2 critical incidents, and our customer service is not where it needs to be. And when I speak to customer service, it's not only the citizens that call in, but it's also the safety of the officers that are out there working the street. And they're not able to answer the non-emergency calls or other 911 calls, which roll over to other jurisdictions because that 1 person is not able to handle what's going on in the street and the phone calls. So we've looked at this. We've tried to find some ways to cover that staffing gap from a vicarious liability perspective. I mean, we know that our staffing's short there, given the calls for service that we receive. And instead of asking for 4 to 5 positions, we're going to ask for 2 positions in the hope that the regionalization of communication centers occurs in the next 2 to 3 years.
Thank you, Chief. And then the third position is a deputy court administrator. As I mentioned before, they are eliminating 0.875 position in their department. So this would just be a 0.25 increase for the court, but it is for a deputy court administrator. Right now, we have the judge who's in the back, who's a contract. You contract with him, but we do have a court administrator who runs the day-to-day operations of our court. We have a very busy court, and the court administrator has to. I think she has 9 direct reports. I think which is a lot for 1 person to have. And honestly, we've had quite a bit of turnover in the department for different reasons. But we feel if we had a better organizational structure in there where we could find some relief for the court administrator, the deputy court administrator could pick up some more of the supervision of some of the court clerks. We may have a better opportunity to decrease our turnover rate and provide some relief for the court administrator. Judge, did you have anything you want to add to that? Thank you. So the overall net increase with the elimination of a few positions is 3.11 FTEs to our FTE count. This is still, oh, were you supposed to do this? Well, okay. This is still below, I'm pretty proud of this, honestly. This is below our staffing level that we had when I first came to the city in 2002. We did eliminate 35 and a half FTEs in the recession of 2002, 2003. It wasn't just because of the recession, but the city just needed some right sizing at that point in time. So we're still below that total FTE count back in 2002 after 12 years. So we've been fairly frugal on staffing needs. So I think the next slide just shows our total counts from 2012 to 2015. The next slide shows staffing broken down by department. As our police department is the largest of 108 FTEs. Our Parks and Recreation department, which includes the Recreation Center, just over 46. Public Works, 29. Administrative Services, which is all our internal departments, 20.5. Community Development has 12. Court is 10.25. And General Government, which is I believe me and Janice, and who else is in there? Oh, Deputy Court Clerk. City Clerk. There's one more person in there, isn't there? Believe us, there's just 4 in there. We'll find out what that 4th person is. Pay performance. It's who? Oh, Steve Art. That's myself, Steve Art, Janice, and then the new deputy city clerk. So that's the 4 positions in general government. I'm going to turn it over to Heather. Heather's going to talk about pay performance and benefits.
Thanks, Patrick. We are in year 2 of our pay for performance and new compensation plan. Last year we launched the plan back in May, and it has worked really well for our city. We've had some huge successes in terms of employee retention and attracting talent from outside of the organization when we've had vacancies occur. So we're really proud of that. If you're in City Hall between now and November 14th, you'll notice that employees are busily working on their evaluations. So if you see our heads in our computers working in the NeoGov system, that's why. So far, second year in, we've seen some efficiencies and improvements, so we know that the process is working, which is exciting. This year we conducted a market study. In the past, we've done a mid-year market study every year, and as part of the launch of our new compensation system last year, we're doing this market study every other year. So we'll have market increases effective in January of next year in the 2015 budget. So far, the market response has been about 3%, and that's pretty consistent with what we've seen from neighboring organizations, as well as the Denver metro region, state of Colorado as a whole for public sector organizations. So we're pleased with the way our compensation plan is working in terms of being fiscally prudent, in terms of how we're moving forward in terms of attracting new talent as well as retaining our existing talent, and then more importantly, being able to reward our high performers through our pay for performance system. In terms of insurance benefits, this year for medical, we're seeing a 5% increase, which is an increase nonetheless, but given what you typically see within the market, between 10 to 15%, I'm really excited about this increase. I think this speaks to the fact that our wellness program is working, and we have wellness champions throughout the city. We have wellness champions, our mayor, Christy Davis, on council who are participating in the sonic striding system, and we've got employees really excited and owning their health and wellness, and I think we're only going to continue to see this reflected in our annual premium renewal numbers. So for 2015, we're proposing the HMO and the HDHP, which is the high deductible health plan, as we have this year. For dental, we're keeping consistent with our 2 plans. The EPO is an out-of-network option that employees can pay more to participate in, we saw about a 4.85% increase in that plan. Our dental plans, we typically lock into a 3-year rate, and so we were up for an increase in 15 with our dental plan. Vision is a voluntary benefit that we provide to employees, and there was no increase there. In terms of the overall 5% medical increase, employees will absorb that with the rate structure in 2015. However, we're continuing to incentivize employees with our wellness program to where they can receive a $10 monthly premium discount for participating in the wellness program. So we hope that helps offset some of that increase. We're going to continue with the use of the sonic boom system, which, as I mentioned, has been hugely successful, and employees are having a lot of fun and really seeing incredible transformations. Employees losing from 40 pounds to running half marathons, you name it, they're out there, and they're very engaged and excited. We are going to also continue the year-end cash incentive. So this fall will be the first year for this cash incentive, but we also already have several employees who have reached 300 points within the sonic boom system, so they'll be eligible for a cash incentive. And we're hoping to continue to grow the program in 2015. Right now we have about 53% of our employee population participating in the wellness program, so we're hoping to just further that effort, which I think will increase next year. In terms of insurance, our workers' compensation renewal went up for 2015, and the safety committee and human resources will be looking at ways to evaluate why this is happening, and again, look for ways to see how we can decrease instances of workers' compensation situations. Property casualty, we saw a huge decrease of 10% with our renewal, which is really exciting. Employees have been very engaged in this effort, and Karen Vannert, our executive assistant, has been very successful in recovering. I think she's up to about $60,000 in restitution in terms of damages to city property, which isn't necessarily factored into these costs, but is a huge success to keep in mind. And then, in terms of public input, you heard similar themes this evening. We held 2 opportunities for public input on the 2015 budget. Heard from Joe DeMott about funding the Wheat Ridge Business District, which has been included. Gina Hallisey in terms of the circus and the festival. Christine Disney, who we heard from tonight. Janice Hopp from Wheat Ridge 2020 in support of Wheat Ridge 2020 funding. Rachel Holteen, who we heard from this evening as well in terms of the active transportation team and the funding bicycle and pedestrian improvements. Scott Carey, who spoke about investment in long-range planning. Councilmember DeTulio, who supported additional funding for community organizations. I believe it was Seniors Resource Center and a couple others. And then Councilmember Davis, who asked for diversification in terms of cleanup funds for community events.
Thank you, Heather. So to wrap up real quickly, and then we'll take questions. We're proposing a general fund budget which is being balanced by using some reserves. We've identified over $9 million dollars of expenditures in this year budget that are directly linked to our city council goals. We continue to, unfortunately, have to defer some maintenance and large equipment replacement in our vehicles and other large equipment and in our street and stormwater and other park maintenance. That list is still continuing to grow. We are projecting reserves of general fund reserves of 17%, unrestricted reserves, and transfers of $125,000 to our capital equipment replacement fund and $1.4 million to our CIP budget. So moving forward, we have a public hearing on the budget on November 10th, and December 8th is scheduled for adoption of the budget and certification of the mill levy. So with that, we would be happy to take any questions.
Christy Davis, right off the bat.
Thank you. So thank you for this work and thanks for the overview. I just have a couple comments, and I know at the last budget time last year, and probably Heather's like, oh, don't start with me, Christy, and probably some others, because I went like line item by line item. I was sitting there saying, can't we cut here? Can't we cut here? Why don't we do this? So I tried to avoid doing that this year, because I do believe, I think as Mr. Pond once said, is that you all are the CEOs of your department and you know best of how the funds should be spent. That being said, I will say that the one concern I have is that I would like to make the request right off the bat that we balance the budget without getting into the reserves. So if that means that each department has to go back and see what little amount, can nip and tuck here, and we can wait on this. I guess a lot of my worry is a lot, kind of undertow is, so if the sales tax ballot question doesn't go through, then we'll have to revisit this. I think that we need to spend within our projected revenues and go from there. And I think the other thing is that looking at those ballot initiatives, I know that will make a difference in the capital improvement, but in some of the other areas, that's not the purpose, and parks and some of those things, it's not the purpose of those funds. So I guess even in my real life, where we all submit budgets and we're told you have to do a 5% decrease for the year or whatever it might be, I do think we need to start without pulling from our reserves, especially considering the next page over or 2 pages later, it was doom and gloom that after this year we have no capital improvement funds. So I guess that would be my first initial request. And I think even as council, we need to look at some of the things we support and sponsor and see what we can do differently. I do think that there's some things in here from some of the things that we discussed that I think, and we all do this in our work budgets or in our home budgets, we say what we want, and then we kind of pare it down to what we're able to do. So I do think that, my personal opinion, however we get there, we need to get to a 0 and not draw from reserves.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember is proposing that we move forward on this, but we do not go into our reserves in order to balance the budget. Can we have some discussion on that? Mr. DiTullio.
Well, if that's what council's going to do tonight, then I think having a discussion about the budget in general would be premature until we saw what was recommended to be cut, the $900,000. That's what we're dipping into the reserve is. So I don't see why we would want to sit here and talk about is 894,000? 800,000. 794, not 890. So I don't know why we would want to not. I think we ought to, if that's the case, if the council agrees to that, we ought to just stop here and say go back and find the 800,000, and then we can reconvene it. Because it would seem kind of silly to add things to the budget, move things to the budget, and then have you guys go back and take out 800,000 on recommendations.
Other comments, Mr. Pond?
I appreciate the concept and the principle, and my counter, though, I think, is that in some ways I have been a proponent, and I think we've discussed this, of allowing ourselves to go down to the 17%, which is the reserve balance minimum. But we've kind of been working our way down there for a couple years, and now we're there. That's right. With this 794, we would get there, and I guess I agree with Councilmember DiTullio that we'd have to really talk about, if we really want to do this, how to get out 800,000 and how to continue a discussion. But frankly, I think going down to 17 was somewhat anticipated by previous conversations that we've had as something that was still fiscally prudent and an opportunity for us to kind of get right-sized as we go. So I'm frankly okay again with the 17%. I guess that's my statement.
So just a addition to that. So I guess my concern is this budget is taking us to 17%, but let's pretend we had a situation on Youngsfield not too long ago as far as we went over budget, so we had to pull monies. I mean, so this won't allow us any type of, so if we're doing the Kipling project and we need a few more dollars, I mean, it's not allowing us any kind of wiggle room when it comes to projects that might be a bit more than expected. So I just hate to budget down to 17%.
Your policy does allow you to, I think it may require a supermajority. Not sure, we'd have to look at the policy, but your reserve policy does allow you to go below 17 for specific reasons.
Mr. Pond again.
Well, and I guess I would ask, and maybe this is just my interpretation, and so it certainly could be wrong, but that the idea that our policy is to maintain a 17% reserve balance, and I suppose in the definition of maintaining that balance would be the adjustments necessary over some period of time that's reasonable in order to make sure that you have that balance. So if you had an episode or an event that for some reason drew you down below that, you would then either need to have an offsetting event, which could be a budget, a budget action to freeze something in the upcoming budget, or some other appropriation of surplus revenues or something like that to essentially make that up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Fitzgerald.
I think the wiggle room comes in 17%, and I'm happy. I'm fine going down to the 17%. We call the 800,000 reserves, but really they're not reserves. They're just available money. So I'm okay with going to the 17%.
Other discussion? Mr. DiTullio. Oh, Mr. Urban.
Thank you. With respect to the, I'll get to the comments by Councilmember Davis here in a minute, but with respect to the consolidation of citywide contingency funds, wasn't that done last year?
It was, and it's an annual thing that we're proposing to do. It keeps the costs down on an annual basis because we're able to reduce it to a level where we think it's going to cover any contingencies that a department may have throughout the year. Instead of having every department budget a full contingency account, we just put it in one line item, and then we're able to lower that by 70, 80,000. So it frees up money in the budget on an annual basis.
Okay. And then with respect to the 794,000 that we are looking at and using from the reserves, how does the 750,000 that we've pre-allocated to 30th Avenue fit into that?
That's this year's.
Yeah, we've allocated that and appropriated that in this year's budget.
And then are there any other projections or inclusions in the budget for 30th Avenue for 2015?
Nothing for major construction. Mainly what's in the budget was for the events. A lot of the money that goes to 2020, the events, the lighting, the banners, flowers, no major capital expenditures. I think we might have I don't know if we put a little bit of money in there. I think it's in preventative maintenance. If nothing happens with the street, we need to do some restriping or striping of the street. I think we got like 25,000 budgeted for that. Yeah, keeping up with what's there, but no major funding besides that, Mr. Urban.
Mr. DiTullio.
So the suggestion I have is that I think Ms. Davis should make a consensus on her recommendation. If that passes, we would stop discussion about the budget until we came back with staff's recommendations. If her consensus would fail, then we could continue on. I think it's a waste of time for us to talk about the budget without seeing what cuts would be made if her consensus pass. So I'm okay. I mean, I understand what George is saying, and I understand what Christy's saying, so I don't know where I'm gonna fall on this if there's a consensus, but I think procedurally it would make more sense for a consensus to say, yes, let's stop and cut 800,000 out and come back, or don't cut 800,000 out and let's continue on with the budget at 17%. So that's kind of where I'm at on this.
Mayor, if I could maybe respond to that. I mean, and that's fine if that's a consensus. I would still like to be able to hear from all of council just to make, I mean, if there's other items that we need to consider because that may impact where we cut or it may help with the dollar or, but I agree. I mean, we don't have to go in great detail, Mr. DiTullio, but I think we want to make sure everybody, I don't want to be surprised in several weeks down the road. It's like, oh, well, what about this too? It's like, I'd rather hear it tonight so that we can factor that into the whole cutting process or adding or whatever.
So Mr. Goff would like to hear some suggestions of what areas that are you're most interested in?
If there are any, I mean, if there's any more discussion, if there's not, there's not.
I'm not on. I think this is our first shot, and I think we can go back and maybe do a little better. And I think all of us who've ever been in the budget process has been told that before. So I think we can go back and maybe do better, and I think we need to start tonight with where we as council see some of the items that Mr. Goff and staff has put together as far as possible expenditures, and go through our feelings of those, and maybe it might be kind of a rob Peter to pay Paul, or okay, let's take a little money from here and spend half of that here, and we've still saved 20,000. So basically, my consensus is that all of us, council and staff, move towards a balanced budget without using reserves. And tonight we discuss some of the budget items that Mr. Goff and staff would like us to consider when they're moving forward to balance that budget.
Okay. Now I need an agreement for that consensus, that we proceed forward with that tonight. Do I have any other discussion on that concept? Does everybody understand it? That we will look at the budget tonight, and our goal is to try to balance the budget, and each member here, or not have to take turns, but each person looks and creates suggestions so that staff knows how to work, and we have a consensus on moving forward that way. Show of hands for yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the other option would be that we don't have a consensus for that. Now, I can't vote on that, right?
Well,
On a
it's
consensus.
your determination of what's a true consensus.
Right. I would vote that direction. So that would be, Mr. Pond?
Well, it was a little bit of a tricky question, so I know you are. I'm happy to keep talking, and I think we should talk and look at this, and then, so I'm not saying, I'm not voting to stop talking. I'm not supporting necessarily the absolute goal of getting down to not going into the reserves. So that's my clarification. I mean, that's all. I don't think it should. I don't think the lack of consensus in my mind should stop us from continuing to talk.
Mr. Urban.
Thank you. Given the fact that the entire package of the budget was delivered to us on Friday, I don't think any of us have had the chance to go through everything in order to have a quality discussion around removing $800,000 from the budget this evening. But I think it can be done in short order in the next few weeks. But given the fact that we just received this, it doesn't seem like we could go through and crack out 800,000 this evening. That'd be my thought.
Is there a possibility of a general discussion as to certain areas that could be trimmed, and maybe we don't get down to $800,000 tonight, but perhaps there's somewhere in between? Would that be a possibility for us?
Well, Mayor, if I could speak to that too. Sure. Yeah, I mean, staff is happy to bring back a list of items that we think could wait and to get down to that level. I just want to make sure that there's no larger policy discussions or items tonight that we should be aware of while we're making those decisions. So if there's not, that's fine. We can adjourn and we'll come back with a list. My only question is, if there was a few of you said you're okay with getting down to 17%, if we cut that close to 800,000 out of the general fund, do you want that going to the CIP fund as a transfer and keep the reserves at 17%?
Another question.
Does that or we don't need to make that decision tonight? We can come up with a list of cuts, and we can tell you you can either transfer a part of that to CIP, or you can keep it in your reserves at a higher level than 17%, or somewhere in between.
Mr. DiTullio.
Well, if you're looking for suggestions, now, I'm not after vehicles, but we had a $516,000 budget item for vehicles this year for vehicle replacement. If that could be looked at where we could actually save some money for a year or two on those. I don't know if those are police vehicles or just general vehicles, but I mean, we've been spending on the average about $200,000 to $300,000 a year on vehicles, maybe $400,000 sometimes. So that's one area where if we wanted to save some money, I think we could maybe look at trying to get some mileage out of some other vehicle. I'm not trying to be like Mike Stites and get into all that. I'm just saying if we're looking at different cuts. The other thing I kind of question is that we're paying $80,000 a year for marketing and promotion for the city, and then we're giving a recommended amount of $50,000 to 2020. So that's $130,000 in marketing and promotion. So is there economies of scale there to combine that into one group or to one area? So my two areas was marketing and promotion for the city for about $130,000. Do we want to look at that more efficiently? And then the vehicle replacement at $516,000. Do we want to look at that more efficiently? Those are the only two that I really saw that stood out. And then
We are going through this process apparently. Mr. Starker.
Well, in lieu of the fact that we didn't really gather consensus on Councilmember Davis's previous motion for consensus, I would offer something else, that we go through the budget now with an eye to trimming as we can to get back to where we can either take money out of our reserve, either take the reserves down to 17% or leave them there and decide on that later. But let's go ahead tonight and try to work through some of the budgeting items that we have, as Mr. DiTullio started to do, and we get through the budget and we postpone the decision about whether to shrink the reserves or not until a later time.
Is that a consensus?
And that was a motion for consensus.
Right. All right, Ms. Davis.
May we just add to that consensus?
Sure.
Can I add to that consensus, perhaps?
Is it friendly? Or?
It's friendly.
Okay.
That we also ask that staff still go back and look to see if there's areas. So we work on it today, do what we can to see where areas where we might see that there's inequities, or maybe can we take a little here or there, and then also ask staff to do the same. That would be my request.
Okay, so the consensus before us now is that here tonight, we all look at the budget and come up with various areas, as Mr. DiTullio has done, and then in addition, ask staff to do the same and to see how much we can trim this down. Later on, we'll make a decision as to what the extra that we saved, what it's gone through. Do we have a consensus on that? Raise your hand. Okay.
If I could respond to that too, I would just recommend, for efficiency purposes, we don't go line by line on items. I don't think that's necessarily what you guys want to do. But again, look at larger policy areas that we can take back, and then come back with a list to say, okay, we can trim somewhere here.
I'm going to go with Mr. Starker.
I just wanted to finish up what I was saying, what he was saying, then I'll be done.
Okay.
So really, my two areas was the vehicle replacement and then the marketing in general.
Yep, I got that.
Bigger, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Starker.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Goff's approach to that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to kind of go to a couple of areas. We've got about $200,000 in District 1 to rebuild 29th and Fenton Street this year. I think we should postpone that until Ashland Reservoir is done in a year or two, and then come back and redo that intersection. And I think we're going to need to redo this street all the way down to Sheridan. So I would certainly offer that as some possible savings.
Scott, Do you want us to interject on, or do you got more?
Well, we can talk about that one.
Okay, I know there's some obligations. I don't know if it has to be done by next year. I don't know why it's in there either.
I think we'd want to review the IGA a little further,
Okay.
just make sure we're in compliance.
There are some obligations. We'll look into it to make sure.
Okay.
Plus where they are with the schedule too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because they got plenty of time to
Yeah.
go.
Not quite done yet.
I see it every day. You know, I got some other things. We want to let some of the other counselors talk about some of their ideas.
Are you done for now, Mr. Starker? Okay. Ms. Wooden?
I have more of a question. I just wanted to confirm that for this school resource officers, I believe you said it's one of the two positions, one of the two full-time positions.
We have two full-time positions that are paid for out of the general fund, and then we have a third grant position.
And that's this one.
And that's the position that we're obligated to pay for a year as a condition of the grant.
So we are still okay with the three?
You'll still have three
Okay.
SROs.
Ms. Davis?
Always the one to speak up on these things. So I was curious, so we have, I'm just wondering, so we have the citywide public relations and marketing efforts that Mr. DiTullio spoke of, but I'm just wondering if so I guess in my mind, I know how budgets work, and you always ask for a little more than what you need, just so you hope you get it.
We don't do that in Wheat Ridge, Ms. Davis.
Okay. So, so that being said, so I would think that, so the Rigid 38 banners and lights program, I'm not sure what the lights program is because we're still talking about, I mean, that was the whole Excel. I'm not quite sure of the definition of the lights program on that. But I do know we have public relations and marketing efforts, so can we just take that 15,000 off of the banners and lights program and just do the 80,000 for marketing and public relations, and we can look at other numbers. But to me, I think those banners are a part of marketing, so you're kind of splitting hairs on some of that. So that would be one of my suggestions. And then my other suggestion, which everyone's gonna know or probably already know, is I do think one of the things, and one of the things that I always try and look at the monies and who all it impacts and the purpose and the reason, and I know with the Zopi Family Circus, we did give it a 3-year go, and the 3-year go was with it to be sustainable after the 3rd year, and I do feel that you know, a lot of money goes towards the circus, which I think is fine and good. But I think when we're in situations like this, that I mean, you're talking. I'm not talking cut the Carnation Festival budget, and so it's kind of deceiving to see which is which because they're combining them. But I'm not sure that it's at the vision that we expected it to be in after 3 years. I mean, I think it's still successful. Don't get me wrong. All of that type of thing. But again, you know, I look at it, if I'm thinking of not giving the senior resource commuter bus $12,000, but giving a week circus $30,000, I don't feel good doing that. So it's not that I'm the Grinch that stole the circus, but but I do have to kind of weigh our resources versus you know, our community needs. So I would also recommend that the circus, that we don't continue with the circus. That would be one of my recommendations.
Okay. Mr. Fitzgerald?
We only have one mic around here.
Yeah, so we have to share. This is one of those budget cuts. We really can't trim out $800,000 a few thousand at a time. We have to look at the big items, which are capital improvement and perhaps some of those replacements. I really hate to cut capital improvements because that's direct service to the citizens, but it's also one of our biggest items. So I think we're going to have to look at that if we intend to cut out $800,000 plus the equipment changes that were suggested earlier. That's another big pot of funds. So I think we're going to have to look at those.
So we have several items here, and we're generally taking note of all of them. It doesn't mean we have to vote on those. It just means these are the items that are being suggested.
We'll look at those.
And we'll look at those. Ms. Wooden?
I have more of a question again. Regarding the Kipling corridor planning efforts, that dollar amount there, what does that consist of? I'm just curious.
Yeah, and that's one area I'll be definitely looking at, and maybe Ken can, I think he got some estimates on what a full corridor plan would cost, but as I mentioned earlier, we were already thinking about maybe doing something smaller, so that could be an area we could
Well, not that it's not important. I just was curious. It's a large amount.
It is.
And it was based on some fairly ad hoc survey work of other jurisdictions who've done similar corridor plans in the last several years.
Okay.
And it was actually kind of at the low end of that spectrum, but I agree with Patrick that we can probably take a look at that as a line item. We want it to be very market-driven, so there was going to be a significant component that was going to be a very focused market study and market analysis. Yeah. So that is one aspect that can get fairly expensive.
Yeah. And then my other question was on the citywide right-of-way maintenance. That's a real specific amount. I was just curious how that amount came out to be so specific. Is it?
It's based on contract numbers, I think. Maybe Joyce can speak to it.
Is that like the I-70
That's our contract with the landscape company that does 49th and Kipling, the four corners there, mowing, irrigation repair, all the mowing up and down 44th and 38th in the right-of-way. And we do have a specific bid contract price on all of the areas that we do. So that's what that is.
I know we've talked before with CDOT on some of those areas that they're supposed to be sharing with us, and I'm just wondering if maybe we could revisit that. It wouldn't save a lot of money, but I know that since that's been discussed before, maybe we should go back to CDOT and define what they're really going to do.
I'm not sure how much of this contract actually is doing what CDOT probably should be, but we can look at it. We'll look at it, though, Jen.
Oh, and then my last comment would just be that if there's any of the improvements that are listed here, if those could be delayed, that's just a suggestion.
I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Some of the improvements to parks and playgrounds, I just don't know if it can be delayed. That's just a suggestion.
And a lot of that would not impact the general fund because it's an open space.
Some of them are not.
Yeah, anything in the general fund we could look at.
Mr. Pond?
I guess a technical question as we look at CIP, because I tend to agree with Councilmember Fitzgerald that if we're gonna even try to make a dent, that's the only place we're gonna make a dent. Not that, and again, it's not that I support that, but my question is reducing the general fund transfer, which shows up at a relatively large amount. If we reduce that general fund transfer, does that actually reduce?
No, it doesn't. The deficit's is in actual general fund operating expenditures, so we're looking for general fund reductions.
So,
but some of the larger, some capital items are in there, vehicles, some equipment replacement. There are some capital items, but the major capital items over a certain dollar amount are all in the capital budget.
So the general fund transfer comes from this year to next, is that correct? Or can you just help me
From this year to next?
What's the general fund transfer as a revenue source for CIP?
For next year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes, once we close the books at the end of this year, we'll have a fund balance left over.
Right.
And it comes out of that amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to hold steady, we do need to forward those. We do need to do that fund transfer regardless. To reduce this $800,000 deficit, you would have to actually take things off of this list, like actually reduce significantly the street preventative maintenance projects.
No, not to reduce the $800,000 that we're talking about. The $800,000 is strictly general fund expenses.
not-
We're dipping into the reserves to balance the general fund, and we're also dipping into the reserves to make that transfer to CIP budget. So cutting that transfer, it does not do anything with.
Yeah, not cutting the transfer, but you could, if you said, well, I'm going to spend $1 million instead of 1.6 million in street preventative maintenance, that would affect the 800?
No, we're still dipping into the reserves 800 to balance the general fund budget.
Mr. Starker.
Feel good about that. Thank you. I had a couple of other items. Just for sort of my understanding, Patrick.
Yes.
On the open space funds and the conservation trust funds, if I'm right, I'm not at the right page. Those are not part of the problem that we're trying to solve.
Correct.
Those are separate funds aside, so we really don't need to balance those.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. Yeah. But there's no reason to say, well, we made this in revenue on it, why don't we spend that in expenditures? Because that doesn't gain us anything in the end.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That was good information. When I look through here, I had a question on we're lumping in the tax increment financing, the TIF revenues in with the SSTEP program. Do we have, I mean, it seems to me that the TIF program would be more appropriate in the urban renewal funding for renewal Wheat Ridge. If you were going to, I mean, is most of that 400 in the SSTEP TIF program, is that for SSTEP?
Yeah, most of it. We have two programs that we still consider TIF. And one of them for next year will be the Sprouts project. It's a TIF, so we're estimating about $250,000, but there'll be new revenues to offset that. So that's an obligation that we're going to have to. The $250,000 is going to have to go back to the loan to pay off the loan.
Okay.
And then the others are the SSTEP. Again, we're getting the revenues for those 5 or 6 SSTEPs that we have.
Right.
And then the difference between 250 and 400 is for the several SSTEPs that we have. So that's our obligation to pay those different businesses.
Okay.
So this really isn't anything we can touch. It's an offset with revenues that come in.
Okay, but all of both the TIF funding, really is more applicable to the renewal Wheat Ridge process?
It is, but it's the renewal Wheat Ridge is a direct payment to the renewal Wheat Ridge board for miscellaneous projects, the $450,000. The second line item that you're looking at, the SSTEP and TIF, are obligations that we have with agreements that we have in place with different businesses, and then also the Sprouts development. So
what would we spend the $450 for in renewal Wheat Ridge?
Typically, that's been used for paying their debt service for the 44th and Watts project, their attorney's fees, Christie's vacations to Vegas. Oh, no, sorry. Just their expenses that they have as a board, and their debt service has decreased significantly on the 44th and Wadsworth project. So it used to be close to $450,000 a year just to cover the debt service for 44th and Wads, but since we paid off a significant amount of that loan, their debt service is about $10,000 a month now, so quite a bit less. So at this point, some of those funds are used for other projects that the board would identify.
Is there room to move in that number?
Probably now. They've been pretty tight for several years. If they sell the two,
we paid off the Wheat Ridge Cyclery.
Yep.
Sort of that's off of the books, and that's this one. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's potentially some room there.
Okay. Excellent.
And I think, Patrick, the 2 pads, that they'll be sold this year or next year?
Kind of crossing
How
over,
will that
I think.
fall?
Hopefully, at the end of this year, first it might cross over.
So that will help with the debt service as well.
Yeah, we're hoping that with the sale of the 2 remaining properties at 44th and Wads that they're under contract to sell, as Christy mentioned, at the end of this year. That will pay off the rest of the loan. We're still obligated to put in a street light at Vance and 44th, which is $250,000-ish. The Urban Renewal Authority owes the city for a couple loans at about $650,000. So hopefully with the sale of those properties and maybe some, in the sale of the property at 30th and Wads, that's being cleaned up right now, they'll be able to pay the city back off, and they may not need this full amount on an annual basis.
Although we've allotted that.
Well, it's in the proposed 2015 budget right now, but we can look at that.
And then I believe I heard we were going to go back and look at the corridor, at the Kipling corridor planning effort to see where that was. Just in terms of getting parity and, only partially and selfish, from a selfish point of view, I'd love to see 29th Avenue sort of parity with 44th on the marketing efforts, and way below what we spent on 38th, but I think that's okay. I think I would also concur with the other counselor who said let's take a look at our fleet acquisition, and I didn't get a chance to kind of go through the details on the Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Maseratis that we were coming
Just
up
a
with.
couple.
And was there anything else? Let's see. I'm probably gonna second the Ms. Davis's observations on the Zope Circus and the Carnation Festival. I think, it's been good to have it in town, but I sort of looking for it to kind of get to a break-even point. And the 29th and Fenton, we can kind of put that off for a couple of years. And then in the neighborhood traffic management program, does that also include the neighborhood sign identity program to go with it?
No, it does not.
Okay, I would make a motion that we put that in there to go with it.
At the same amount, or?
Well, I'd stay with the same amount, but I'd just add the sign program to go with it, and maybe we do half as much every year.
Okay. Consensus from council?
I agree with that.
And with that, as long as we can't whack the open space fund, I'm okay.
Is there a consensus?
Are we looking, you, Mr. Julio, you wanted to speak as well?
No.
I thought you were just waving over
No,
there.
so-
In cooperation.
I think the AT&T group is the budget buster for $1,000, and she doesn't even hear me say it. No, I think the consensus that Mr. Starker made was to get as close to a zero budget balance as possible, not taking the 800,000 out. But I think based on the recommendations of council to look at certain areas like 29th and Fenton, the vehicles, the Kipling corridor, I think that's going to get us pretty close. And I'd be okay with being a little over the 17%. If we're not at 800,000 exactly, I'm okay with that as long as we've made that second pass through it. And
I think that was our general agreement, that we were going to get as close as we could, but and then also that staff would also look as well as the suggestions.
Yeah, and I would concur with Mr. Starker that if we could add the signage program within the 100,000 of that traffic calming, if that's feasible, that we do that too. So it's a double.
I need to add that we have doubled the donations we've done previously, and I think we need to look at that as well, since our income is not as high as we thought, and we have, as I said, exactly doubled all the donations we did, and if we're going to pull it in, we've got to pull it in everywhere.
So I'm not, Mr. Goff, on the Zoppy Italian Circus, was that for a full 2 weeks again, that amount?
No, their new proposal was to bring that down to just a week. And I think the cost for the Zope Circus would be $40,000. That's their direct fee, but I think there might be some other cost associated with it too. But I think their payment to the actual circus folks is $40,000 of what they're proposing for their budget. They're asking for an $80,000 cash contribution from the city out of their budget of $188,000 for the circus and the festival. About 40 plus is for the circus.
So that's why I wanted to make sure Ms. Davis knew that it's 40,000 versus 70. Is that what you were thinking still?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that the Carnation Festival and the circus was kind of in that. So I think I'm just going back to 3 years ago when we started this let's all hope it gets to break even after 3 years, give it 3 years and go from there.
So you're recommending to cut the full 88,000 or the 40,000?
Well, I don't have the breakdown of how everything is, but I'm not looking to cut the Carnation Festival dollars, but I don't know that the Zope Circus is at a break even, so therefore, something's gonna give.
And Mr. Fitzgerald, are we done with that subject? I think we are. Mr. Fitzgerald?
I don't remember the consensus being that we were necessarily going to firmly cut the $800,000 out. I thought our consensus was that we were going to talk about a few ideas here, but we were going to let staff come back.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And then we could talk about what was going to be cut later. So these are just ideas.
Exactly, and
for
staff
consideration.
requested that. We weren't going to nail it down to those specifics.
Yep, I understand that. Yep.
Okay. Mr. Urban, do you have something?
Just as items to look at, where were those? With respect to the 88 transition plan and the bike and ped improvements, is it really going to cost $50,000 for that 88 transition plan? Or is there a way to better ballpark that? It just seems like a credible amount of money for just having a plan. That we don't have a current transition plan?
We don't, which is, we need to get one in place for sure.
I
And
totally
don't know
understand the
about the
need
cost.
for that, but that
Yeah,
seems like a lot.
I mean, a big chunk of the cost is to hire temporary help to actually go out and do the survey. I mean, we could certainly look at the number further and see if it can be tweaked, refined, but it's in the ballpark based on what we need to do.
Okay.
We've got that down too.
Yep.
One more.
As one member of council that works on the budget now, I'm not really too fond of cutting our donations back to our organizations, nonprofit organizations yet. I think that we look at the suggestions from city council, and then if we have to come back and look at those, but I think those support the community, and they're important to the community, and I don't think cutting those right now would be my first preference until we actually look at the bigger picture of the bigger numbers.
I think the object here was everybody to make suggestions as to what they would like to include, and that we will discuss them when they come back. Other suggestions? Mr. Fitzgerald?
I realize I'm going to be tarred and feathered for saying this, but yeah, that's right. The Grinch that stole the circus told me it's okay. Actually, the police department is our biggest expenditure. So, as far as I can recall, we've never failed to give them what they wanted. So, maybe we ought to look at that too.
Well, they're not immune from cuts. They definitely don't get everything they want on an annual basis. They are the largest budget, but they have the most staffing too. But we can look and see if there's anything in there also, as we will with every department.
And Mr. Urban, one more?
I would just counter that by saying they've never failed to deliver for us in their public safety, so that's a critical part of our community. That as much as that's the case, I think that they've always delivered for us, and we need to do the same for them.
Once again, the idea is right now is to make suggestions, and then we will discuss them further as they come along. But thank you anyway. Have we covered this subject now? I believe we have.
Thank you very much. We will we'll bring back some items for further discussion.
Thank you, Council. Are there any other items, either from staff? Council, do you have any individual items? Any individual items you'd like to discuss? We're getting tar and feather ready if you don't be quiet. Okay. In that case, I would like to close the meeting.